G'day and welcome to the Investor Motivation Podcast. Welcome, Amy.
Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm well. I'm in sunny Queensland on conference in Brisbane. So doing it from the hotel room,
Yeah.
lots of comfort, so doing well.
You've just finished the whole entire conference for the week now?
Correct. It's the Self-Managed Super Fund Association National Conference, which we do in February each year. And they go around to either Brizzy, Sydney, Adelaide and Melbourne. And I've done this one for probably 10 to 15 years and met some awesome new people that I haven't met before and learned a few more things and covered off. Obviously, it's not just self-managed super funds, it's complexity of estates, protecting assets through to the new laws around superannuation and the 296 legislation for those that have over $3 million in their superannuation funds. So a lot of information on that. So there's a lot of work to be done for a lot of our clients, particularly those that have very lumpy assets in their self-managed super funds, particularly farming land.
Okay.
So that's what's going to cause a lot of problems for our clients out in the country.
Yep.
So
all right.
lots of learnings.
Yeah, you'll have to get back to the office and tell us all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. What are we chatting about today, Alice?
Today we are talking about being in a relationship and making the finances work. You and I both had a really interesting appointment earlier this week, and it was a real heartfelt appointment, less financially focused, but we had the male of the relationship in, and you could just see how affected he was because the finances are not where he'd like them to be at the moment, but they're also not where he'd like them to be because of a decision that was made that didn't align with the couple's goals together. It was very one-sided, and I don't know, I just thought it's definitely worth us having a conversation around that and how to avoid that potentially in future for others.
Yeah, and this is not a new couple. This is a couple that have been together for no doubt decades and lovely people. But yeah, it just shows even though they've been together for decades, keeping the communication up is pretty vital.
Yeah, from the start of the relationship all the way through to the end, you need to communicate 100%.
Yeah, and I'd nearly say it's more so important at the start to make sure you're on the same page on some pretty important topics. But when you're younger, you're probably not thinking about those things. But acknowledgement of land. Amy, I'll let you.
Yeah, before we get into it all, on behalf of the Investor Motivation Podcast, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we do record this podcast and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Cool. Now, Amy, right at the start, there's a little quote that I love already, which I wrote down, and it was, how do we avoid not being financially being incompatible? How can we be compatible in a relationship, both at the start when we're both a couple finding their way, then down the track where you might need to change things. So let's assume that a lot of our listeners, there's going to be some listeners that are married and have been for many, many years, and there's people that are in newer relationships. There's probably, obviously communication is the key around both these things, but what's your thoughts on, let's say we're looking at a newer couple to start with, how have you done that with Cody?
Well, I think, like you said, communication is going to be the key throughout the lifetime of any relationship, but at the start, and I guess with any relationships in Australia, there's a bit of a taboo about money and actually talking about the nitty-gritty details of how we receive our money, what we do with it, the whole entire money receiving and spending process. But being really transparent with your partner, especially, actually disclosing, this is my income, these are my personal expenses, and understanding the joint expenses, and just working out how cash flow is going to actually go down in the relationship is really important to make sure you're on the same page. And I think people talk a lot about people's money story, which is, actually talking about how you were raised and what money looked like to you growing up, what it means to you, and what you actually value spending money on, I think can be another really awesome way to just make sure you guys are on the same page. And if you're not, understanding why you might not be.
Yeah. So a good example of that where someone might be obviously a very keen saver and money's not a dictator of their happiness. They don't have to wear the most expensive clothes. They're happy in whatever, and they're happy regardless.
Yeah.
And the other person might be very keen on keeping up with the Joneses and having the right car, the right caravan, the right clothes.
Yeah.
Says me in a magnificent H&M T-shirt worth a grand total of $14. You see how much I care about what I wear. So yeah, obviously, and not saying one's wrong and one's right, not at all. But it's about if you've got someone that is happy with H&M and someone that it's got to be the high end stuff, then that's going to be problematic. Resentment will kick in at some stage.
Yeah, and there are ways to mitigate, I guess, one person's ability to actually overspend money that should be for joint purposes. But at the end of the day, if one is really committed to being that saver and frugal and one is just, money comes in, it's going to go straight out, there will be that rift. And acknowledging early, do you want to go through a whole entire lifetime of trying to suppress that resentment, or is it just not compatible?
Yeah, I think if there's not changes in behaviour, or like either way, one comes down to meet the other, another one comes up, and you, I suppose, grow together. Then resentment will build over years and decades, and it will become obviously unbearable where you're just not aligned. And I suppose in my scenario, what I've learned over my lifetime, and having a separation within that, which is disappointing but necessary in hindsight, that some of those key issues, you can come together on this stuff through proper communication and effort. And I think with we all, I suppose, grow in our maturity. And I think there's a financial maturity as well, where it doesn't have to be flash cars, flash T-shirts, and all the rest. Says he sitting in a very nice hotel room. So don't anyone feel sorry for me sitting in my $14 T-shirt, because I'm in a very nice hotel room with air conditioning in Brisbane, an awesome city in Australia. So, but you've got to be on the same page and know,
and that's
appreciate money and value it.
And that's fine for you to have the $14 shirt and the expensive hotel room if that's how you value where you spend your money. If it's not on personal appearance, or not that a $14 T-shirt looks horrible, but it's just making sure that your values are somewhat aligned. Like you said, there's no right or wrong in what anybody wants in life or wants to spend their money on. It's just making sure you meet each other in the middle.
Yes, and I suppose the case study that we saw was really not about a $14 T-shirt. That's turned into the analogy of the conversation, but it was an extremely expensive retirement home in a town that it turned out, one was happy to go to, but the other was not. And that was a big issue, and a lot of stamp duty paid, and will they get their money back if they choose to sell? They really just didn't have those deeper conversations on what is a monster purchase, and with interest rates going up, it's put financial pressure. And I think that's where it was lovely to have this conversation with a guy similar to my age, where he's smart enough and been around long enough to know that where you live or what hotel room you get or what T-shirt you wear will not dictate your contentment and your happiness.
I think that was really refreshing during our appointment. So for those listening, in this instance, there's a home that this person lives in now with their partner, happy there. They've got their first grandchild just down the road, so that's the wife's really values having that time with the grandchildren, but the husband has purchased a property hours away from Horsham, and it strips away that grandparent ability, but said, yes, no worries, we'll buy this house if that's what's going to make him happy. And now in hindsight, it's caused a huge rift in that relationship, and now that property might not be able to be sustained, and they may be selling it and at a loss, so that financial loss has occurred, as well as the mentality behind it all. It has caused a huge rift, and you know, it just needed to be a conversation at the time to say, what does, you know, retirement look like for you? Is it being in this different location without our friends and without our family, without the grandkids close by, but we're on this massive lavish house? And he said, you know, in hindsight, our happiest days together as a couple were when we were in the small 2-bedroom house in Horsham and just living paycheck to paycheck. But now that everything's accumulated and conversations have just not been had anymore, it's definitely to the detriment of the couple.
Yes, right. And a big stress point, and it's whether it's a big purchase like this, or whether it's a car, or whether it is a TV, it's at all different levels. I think this is where couples need, obviously, parameters around when purchases are made up to a certain level. Because there's always this risk of someone being controlled or feeling as though they're being controlled or told what to do. No one likes that. You know, people feel that as a financial abuse, where you're not given an allowance, or you don't have your money. You make all the decisions. You have all the money. I have no control. I have no input to decisions. Where there's just got to be a common ground and nearly some set rules on, each week we get $150 per week to spend.
Yeah.
That's my money, that's your money, no questions asked. Go your hardest. But on purchases for the family unit that are over X amount of dollars, we have a discussion. And I think that should be from these ground rules, and they can evolve over time, because as people get more financial, you might say, well, when we first get married, we have to have an agreement that anything over $300, we need to have a good conversation. Do we really need it? At what expense? What's our opportunity cost? Does it mean we don't get to pay more off the home loan, or we don't get a holiday? Let's chat about anything above $300. Time goes on, that might be, let's chat about anything above $1,000. So I think there's got to be flexibility.
And I think it's really hard for young couples to begin with as well, when there might be a major breadwinner, so someone who's bringing in more of the income than the other, and evening up. Is it fair to do just a dollar amount each into a joint account, or is it a proportional amount depending on income coming in? That's a really common question that I see on the forums, and it is really hard, and it's always going to be per relationship, whatever works for the couple. But as long as you're communicating what the long-term goals are together, and if one's happier, to put more towards that, or just working out what's going to work for you. I see some people that like to do it not proportionately, but dollar figures each, and then one might put a little bit more into an offset account, but instead of interest being accumulated, they might say that person does more work around the house kind of thing. So,
and of course, when couples are having a baby, it's generally, and rightly so, that the female, the wife, the spouse is the one that is home caring for a certain amount of time, and obviously people are free to choose these days to how that looks with childcare and grandparents and getting back to work. Obviously that's choose your own adventure there, but that's where sometimes more money is coming in from one partner, but and that's where resentment can build in, and this is where you or whoever makes the money, there's got to be those set rules that you made up all those years ago or recently, that everyone needs to be able to say, I'm heading down the street to catch up with my friends, and that might be a beer for some, it might be a cocktail for others, it might be a coffee and a lunch, and what you spend your money on, that allowance, and I mentioned $150 per week per person, whatever works for anyone. There's no rules on that, and you've got flexibility. So working or not, I think you need some set rules.
Definitely, and rules that let you be who you want to be, and it's not depending on anyone else's money.
Yes, absolutely. So it does boil down to having some great discussions, and having those discussions as early as possible.
Definitely.
What would be the trigger to those discussions, Amy? It's um, I suppose it's at a time when you start to pull things together
Yeah.
in a relationship where say, hey, we better start a joint account, or we're both going to save for a home, and we'll do some first home saver using our superannuation to save deposits and things like that.
Yeah.
Is where you'd start to mimic what you're doing in budgeting to a goal.
Yeah, definitely. I think a trigger really is internal. You can feel yourself getting a little bit frustrated about little things, and it might be when you are at the beginning of a relationship and you go out for tea and you've got to send this person money every time you buy something because you don't yet have the joint account. You can feel yourself going, oh, that's really annoying that I've got to continually do this. So that can be a trigger to say, hey, is there a better way that we can do this? Let's start the joint account and just put in $200 each a week, and that's then our joint expenses. I don't need to ask you to send me money every time we purchase something new. And
Yes.
just monitoring what that looks like. That's just an easy way to get rid of that annoying ask someone for money and then making sure that they have got the money, they haven't spent it first. So I think having a joint account is a great way to make sure if there is an overspender in the relationship that they first sent the money to the joint account, and then whatever's left over they can spend because that's their personal money now. There's no risk of them overspending and not being able to contribute equally or fairly to the joint.
Credit cards, they're still a thing. I know with your generation, they don't seem to be used as much, Amy. But I suppose that's where people can lean on those where they haven't got the budget. Oh, we're not just talking, I suppose, not just talking about couples and setting goals and budgeting to the money that you have. It's where you get into strife and, one person in the couple uses a credit card to get themselves out of strife or to buy that thing. Things like that. If that's not communicated, that's going to be hard yards.
Yeah, I think, like you said, if it's not communicated, it's always going to be a harder conversation down the track once the damage has been done than just being upfront and honest and communicating a need or a want and actually talking it out.
Yep. Amy, what about where, and we see this all the time, that you've got one person in the relationship that is, he takes care of that or she takes care of that. They're in charge of the finances. I don't know what he does. I'm not worried by it. And, there's a lot of trust there that things have been done right. And generally, we see that those person that is in charge of the finances by default, or that's the job they wanted to take on, they do a very good job. But the other person's, for whatever reason, just not interested.
Yeah, and I think it's really up to the person that is in charge of the finances a bit to, especially if there's a family involved, you do need to have the conversation and say what's going to happen when one of us might not be here anymore. You really need to upskill that person that doesn't want to be involved and has all the trust in you, but they need to know what is happening with the finances, what runs the household. I think, it's possibly a little bit more on the decision maker to incorporate the other person.
Yeah. So even if we're not talking about down the track when someone passes away, if the male, who will generally go first, controls the money, it's not just about that scenario, it's about making sure that whilst your partner or spouse may not be interested and happy and trusting of you to do it, some level of communication to say, this is where the money is, this is a joint account, here's where money goes to the children's education fund, the home loan, this is what goes into super from my wage, and I suppose just nice open discussion about what's happening and why.
Yeah, education is never ever a bad thing in my opinion. Being more aware about as much as you can be will always be the best way to go.
Yeah. So I suppose bigger picture and relating back to the case studies, conflicting large goals for the couple that we spoke about, and that's where you probably need to independently sit down and jot down probably big goals. There's probably no more than 2 or 3 that people may have.
Yeah.
That might be, I want to do a big overseas European or Canadian American holiday. I do want to move to seaside town over here, and I may want to run a marathon. Things like that. So I think there's those independent goals that every individual have. Then you come together and say, well, gee, what have we got in line here? Oh,
Yeah.
you want to move away, and then also I don't want to move away from the kids.
Yeah.
That's where, okay, we better have a chat about this one before we make any moves.
Yeah. And I think that you made a really great suggestion in our client appointment when it was, you know, the fact that this, you know, the property was purchased so far away and there are no friends or no family there, that we've had clients in the past that have made those big moves, paid all the stamp duty on the property to purchase, and then a year later come home because they've realised, well, actually, they really do value having their friends and their family close by, and they've missed that. So, yeah, I think that's actually a really great tip that you mentioned. Next time, if they, you know, sell the house, they can actually just go there for a few weeks or a few months at a time, rent out a place, test the waters before they commit to this massive upfront cost.
And I've done that, and had a number of clients actually take that advice. And one client in particular, lovely guy, finished work in Melbourne, said, right, I'm going back to where my family is in WA, and moved to WA. And wanted to buy. I said, look, no, don't buy, just leave it invested, rent, see if you like it.
Yep.
Back to Adelaide, back to Melbourne, to Ballarat. And that was, at no stage was there any ownership of a home, and he had that flexibility to make the move, which he did. We can actually see, do I like the place or not? And turned out there's quite a few places that he liked but didn't love, and moved on.
Yeah, it kind of, it sounds common sense when you think about moving to a different state just to try it first, but people, when they have an opportunity to buy a dream home that they think is going to make them really happy and they'll spend a lifetime being happy there, they just, head first, or feet first, really, without thinking about it.
And I understand why, because when you going to a new town and getting to I get to buy something, I get to look through houses, and that's something I have not done for many years. Bloody exciting thing to do. So the endorphins, the dopamines running high, very exciting. But and it might be seen as a cautious approach. But I just suppose I know, you may not love it. You're often moving away from a place you've spent a large portion of your life where there is a great friends base, if not family as well. And ultimately, time with friends and family, particularly as we get older, family is probably more important than where you live.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
Well, Amy, number one tip for you for, I suppose, how to avoid being financially not compatible.
Number one tip, I think you can actually Google it as well. There's a list of questions compiled, I think, on australianrelationships.org, and they have the key things that you probably should be talking about with your partner, and it does touch on, your 5, 10, 20-year goals, and also the harder conversations, like if one of us doesn't have any income coming in, what are we going to do? I think those are really vital because those are the make or break moments, and it also tells you about what that person values and how lenient people are.
Yep, cool. My number one tip is just be on the same page.
Easy said and done, Rob.
Be on the, well, I suppose, how do you get to there? Well, you communicate, you work out what your common goals are, what you believe in, how you value and respect money. So, what one just turned into about 400 options. So, you've got to be on the same page. Otherwise, it's a relationship and a lifetime of potential resentment and heartache and frustration. So, have your goals aligned, and the way you value money is really important. We all know how hard we work, for money that we make, the risks that we take to do it, the effort that everyone puts in. I was walking across the Brisbane River, and the guys working in this 80-degree humidity, full sleeves on the major infrastructure works that is going on here. That's hard work. These guys are working hard and earning every dollar they make. Yeah,
I think just on you saying that, another number one tip I've also got is to make sure you still do have personal bank account. I'm all for joint accounts for joint expenses, but we all need to have our own money that we can spend freely without worrying about the other person. Yeah, I think especially if you're out in the 80% humidity working hard for that money, you deserve to be able to go out for a beer with your mates when you want to.
Yeah, and that's right. I suppose I did mention, early in the chat, $150 per person per week. That is theirs, no questions asked.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing wrong with having, a bank account, and a lot of the wives call that the runaway account, and that could be 5, 10, 15, 20, or 30, or 50 grand what each, and that person say, well, can do what they like with that, but that is money to the side, and that doesn't form part of that. Oh, we need to have a discussion every time we buy something over $300. I think there's got to be flexibility, and otherwise that's where resentment kicks in.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
you've got to structure things that there is some flexibility, that you don't have to justify everything you do as an individual, but you do need to have conversations what you do as a couple and as a family unit.
Yep, I think it's have the conversation of what you want to do and achieve as a couple, have the money go to that joint account automatically from your wage each week or fortnight, and then anything on top of that is yours and yours to play with.
Yeah, fantastic. I reckon we've done enough with that one, Amy. That's a really good chat. Thank you for that. Lots of learnings as always.
Yeah.
Please hit up our YouTube channel. There's well over 600 videos there now. We're become quite active in that space. And Amy, you're running TikTok and Instagram. I've got my new TikTok channel, which has been a lot of fun to do. So thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, it's probably also a quick shout out to if you're local to Horsham, that we are hosting an International Women's Day event on the 8th of March. So it's down at the Town Hall, run by Consortium, but we've got lots of guest speakers from different industries coming in. So that's really an awesome one to look out for if you're interested.
Beautifully organised. Thank you, Amy.
No worries. Thanks, Rob. Bye, everybody.
Bye.